Hey guys, John Puckett here, weekend warrior guitar player. Welcome to my couch. I'll talk to you real quick about this today. Something that I get asked about pretty regularly nowadays, which is pretty wild considering I don't think of myself as a slide player. This thing's actually pretty new to me as well. It's just been within the past 3 or 4 years I think I've started to kind of get a bit of a grip on it. Until then, the last 25 years, I've picked it up and put it down probably a dozen times, like many of you, because it's frustrating. It's frustrating as hell, man. This is a tough thing, you know, when you sit around and spend your time sequencing pentatonic scales and going through your 3 notes per string stuff and your all that, and then you put this on your hand, you know, you find out real quick that all that, you can't do it. You can't do it anymore. This is totally in the way. So, you know, at least for me personally, when this goes on my hand, my mentality changes a little bit. The first thing I think you have to realize is all that other stuff that you can do, now you can't. And if you try to, it sounds worse. It sounds way worse trying to do... Like that pentatonic scale is awful, mind you, and of course I'm in standard tuning, so it's 50 times worse with the slide on. So, you know, you got to kind of get out of that mentality when one of these goes on. When you start to play a slide, at least me anyway, I found out real quick that, you know, you can't even take for granted a single note. That, you know, when we fret notes, you know, that A note is not a very difficult thing to do, you know, as long as you press down somewhere in here and don't press too hard to where you bend it out of pitch. You know, you don't have to think really about intonation, anything like that, approach. You just press and play and it works. When a slide goes on, it's a little bit different. And one of the first things that I usually notice when I see a player struggling or, you know, ask about some slide pointers or things like that, and I see them play, the biggest thing is not what's going on with the slide, but what's going on with the right hand, or most often than not, what's not going on with the right hand, which is muting. And I believe this is, of the 3 things I'm going to talk about today, muting is definitely the most important, and is going to be that thing that if you figure out, if you get your mind wrapped around that, or at least are conscious about it as you play, that's going to speed up your progress significantly. So this is probably a good time to mention that I'm a hybrid picker, meaning that I use my fingers and my pick to play both chord and single note. And I do it with the slide too. A lot of slide players just use your fingers. That's cool too. Even people that play with a pick oftentimes will tuck the pick away and play with just their fingers to do slide. That's cool. I don't. You know, if that works for you, great. If you hybrid pick like me, cool, fine. I've even seen, you know, some people that flat pick that do a really killer job with it. But either way, no matter what technique or what style you're going to use, still you're going to have to figure out a way to mute the strings one way or the other. I do it by, like, let's focus on this A note right here on the B string. With my palm, I mute everything above it, and then with my ring finger, I mute the low E or the high E string. And whether I'm picking that note with the pick or whether I'm using my finger, the muting, you see that thing? The muting doesn't change. Like everything else that's not that B string is being muted. It's all dead. I'll oftentimes mute behind the fret too. You know, if I'm really doing like a longer line that I want clean, I'll mute behind the fret too. You know, so all that, as you're moving, all that noise on those other strings gets muted out. So, number 1, mute. Mute. Super important. or you will never master the single note because you'll always have all this other junk ringing out underneath it. So really stay focused on your muting. The next is kind of twofold. I'm going to talk about vibrato, but as part of vibrato, I'm also going to mention a lot of pitch things in here because this is where the whole intonation thing comes in, that we typically don't have to think about, because when you fret a note, like just talking about a minute ago, as long as your finger's behind the fret, you're cool. As long as you're not pressing too hard to get that bend and to make it sharp. Slide's a little different. You know, you can use the frets as a roadmap, but even more important than that, you got to use your ear, because you don't really have a whole lot of room for forgiveness there. My approach to this is, I'll never forget when I was a kid seeing the Whitney Houston video come out for I Will Always Love You, and I thought it was so cool. I loved watching her in the verse part after the big drum hits, boom, and right? And Whitney throws her head back and she hits this big note. I thought it was so cool watching Whitney's throat, because Whitney sang the note, the I, and it's like she hit that note and then the vibrato started. You could see her neck. You could see like the vibrato speed up. And I'll never forget that. So that's the approach that I take to slide guitar. And I know one of the things to me that makes for an amateur sounding slide player is that erratic vibrato of just coming into the note and already being on the vibrato. I mean, it's a sound. People do, it is a sound, but it's not the only sound, and it's aggressive. And if you want to sound smooth, that's not the way to do it. Yeah, I mean, it's killer. It's got some to it. But, you know, oftentimes, you know, you want to be Whitney. You want to hit that note, establish the note, then get your vibrato going. Next up from that, even to take that a step further, I try to be aware of my vibrato speed, in that I try to hit the note, start the vibrato moderately, and work it up to speed, almost like an organ player. But like, to me, the really good vocalists do this too. That whole... right? And I try to be really conscious, I guess I should say, about the distance I'm vibratoing. When I first started playing slide and first started being conscious of my vibrato, I realized that I was only going flat and reaching up to the note, right? So it sounded like this. Oh. Like everything was flat. The more I watched the great slide players, I felt like, almost like pendulum-like, that the fret was right in the center of their vibrato. So they were going equally sharp and flat, you know? So that's something I try to do. And try to keep that distance equal, no matter, even if I'm doing a wild vibrato or slower vibrato, I'm trying to be conscious of that. Which to me, that plays a lot into the pitch, that if you're just doing it from below, it often just sounds flat. You know, there's nothing in there other than flat sounds away from the note. So yeah, you got your muting, vibrato, conscious of pitch. And the next thing that we often don't think of as regularly fretting and fingering guitar playing, is how we get into a note. You know, now there are hammer-on, pull-offs, you know, and even with your fingers slide, you know. But I think this is something you really have to be conscious of with a slide, so that you just really get that approach to the note. A lot of players, including myself, do the rake. I do it with my pick. Some people do it with a thumb, where you kind of rake the upper strings coming into that note. So when I'll do that, I'll rake with my pick and then pluck the note. Like, for example, we're using this A note. So I'll do something like this. right? You can do that coming from below. Right? I'm a big fan of descending with kind of like a slide from nowhere, like a slide that really doesn't come from any certain note, but like a... You know? So hopefully that helps out. A couple things for you to chew on there. Mastering the note before you can master the phrase, before you can master the solo. So, yeah, muting, vibrato, pitch, and approach. I think if you start working on a few of those things and working that into your practice time, you'll find that everything else starts to fall in place a little bit quicker, or at least I hope it does anyway. So I hope you got something out of this. You guys keep picking, and we'll see you on the next one.